Welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, is the best way for you to exit your highly appreciated business or real estate. I'm your host, Brett Swartz. In each episode, I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, and business minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. I'm excited about our next guest. She has become a good friend of mine, and she's actually an expert when it comes to all things escrow. She's a senior escrow officer at Orange Coast Title here in Northern California. Now, Orange Coast covers a lot of all of California, but especially Northern California. Susan is the go-to. In fact, we've done multiple deals together, and she is going to talk to us a little bit about her experience as an escrow officer, as well as, in particular, the Deferred Sales Trust and some transactions she's helped to aid in closing as a title professional. She brings over, I think, let's see here, over 8 or 9 or 10 years in the escrow world. And since 2011, she started out at Fidelity National Title, and then she went to Orange Coast Title in 2000 and early 2012. So please welcome to the show with me, Susan Trujillo. Susan, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Brett.
And well, I'm glad to have you on the show. It's excited to introduce our audience to you, and maybe even potential clients that are closing the Deferred Sales Trust, or current clients closing the Deferred Sales Trust. With that, would you give our listeners a little more about your current, your story and your current focus?
Sure. So, I started my career actually a little longer than what you mentioned, but we met, closer to that period. But I have, exclusive training in escrow, specifically here in Northern California. With that, the escrow officer is the liaison between our title department, our title officers. So it helps streamline these transactions. Whereas Southern California, title and escrow are handled separately in most cases, sometimes by the same company, but there are many escrow-only companies and title-only companies in Southern California. But with the Northern California practice here, we, again, streamline and we get direct training for all escrow and, the legal practices that we handle here. But doesn't exclude us from handling the Southern California properties. So,
Excellent. And before we dive in too much into the technical part on the escrow and different things, would you help our listeners get a little bit, help them get to know you a little bit more, maybe a little bit about your background, your story, and how you came to become a title professional?
Yeah. So, I started my career closer to late 90s. And with that, an escrow officer is groomed into this business with the specific training. Sorry, the resale transactions, gather mainly the practice that we handle. I truly enjoy my career because of the difference of the clients. We get a pool of people geographically. I enjoy the one-on-one with the buyers and sellers. Our realtors help educate us as well, and then we, reciprocate that. But I truly do enjoy it, just with the variety that we get. Each transaction is totally different. They're not cookie cutter. So with that, the growth brought me to my career now. I grew up in the Bay Area, beautiful part of California. I have 2 great sons. I enjoy golfing, outdoor activities. And now, being here, a neighbor of Brett Schwartz in Roseville, is another great thing that, connects us.
Totally a small world, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I first met Susan doing a Deferred Sales Trust presentation at Orange Coast Title. I think it was about 3 years ago,
Yeah.
and I came to the office and did a presentation, and then started to do transactions over the years, just slowly growing, and it seems to be growing every year.
Yeah.
But that's actually where I was originally from too, Mission, San Jose, Fremont area. I kind of grew
Uh-huh.
up with my dad, custom homes, room additions, all throughout the Bay Area. That's where we were at. But then I relocated up to Sacramento with my mom, and have been here kind of ever since. And so it's kind of cool to find out that Susan just moved to Roseville. And I was like, oh, where do you
Yeah.
live? I'm like, oh my gosh, you're like a mile from me. So we're just around the corner from each other. So
Uh-huh.
very small world. And Susan, I want to take a step back and help our listeners to get you know even a little bit better. I believe we've all been given certain gifts in these life, and I believe these gifts, some people call them strengths or superpowers. I believe they're God-given gifts, but I believe these gifts have been given to us to be of help or a blessing to others. So I'm
Yeah.
curious. I want you to go back maybe to either the high school days or the college days, or even when the days have passed. What do you feel maybe was the gifts that you were given, and how do those gifts help how you help people today?
I truly believe my gift is, helping people and educating them. My mom was a school, elementary teacher, and I kind of feel I have that gift of, teaching others. I like to explain things, and with that, helping them gain the knowledge of whatever it is that we enjoy doing. So, if my biggest joy is cooking and baking. So I just remember, learning that, having my mom teach me, and then now with having sons and a grandson that can help cook. I really love that part of just teaching others, and I think that really grew me for this career. I've done multiple trainings throughout the year with our one of our business partners in Terra Real Estate, joined their educational center, and I just love that part. This industry is so fast paced that sometimes escrow officer gets wrapped up with just the go 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 and really doesn't slow down to fully explain things. Sometimes it's sometimes under the gun. It's just kind of the being told and sign. Um, but I really like to slow down the process and help with the education behind the transaction itself, just so that at the end of the day, you know the the information sticks with the client, and they gain it just as much as I do.
Absolutely, and I can absolutely attest to that as well. I would say if I had to give like a sentence that can describe your level of service and help, it's really grace under fire, right?
Mhm.
So there's a lot going on in escrows, especially when there's stuff like deferred sales trust, and
Right.
there's multiple people, and there's different entities, and there's different brokers and lenders and relationships.
Mhm.
But I would say, Susan, you epitomize grace under fire,
Mhm.
and so I appreciate you sharing that. You mentioned your mom being the elementary school teacher. I imagine she had a lot. She had to be a lot of grace under fire too, right, with kids that age.
Yeah.
So that being said, I like to dive into the escrow part of things and becoming an escrow officer, and in particular the deferred sales trust. We'll touch on that here coming up. But just for background, I'm curious, Susan, how many deals would you say transactions have you helped close over the years?
Um, well, overall, it has been at least thousands with my career, but the deferred sale trust, with those being really newer to the real estate world, I would say about 20 at this point. And I'm seeing they're gaining traction, so I'm sure there's going to be many more.
And so let's talk about that for a second. So when you first heard about this, I think it was before the show, we are talking about 3 or 4 years ago when you first started
Hmm.
doing some of these transactions.
Yeah.
And I think 80% of them are like type primary homes, high end primary
Right.
homes, 20% investment properties. You were saying, um, I'm curious, what was when you first learned about it, right? And as an escrow officer, perhaps you see a lot of these different things or different ideas, or I don't know, maybe you
Mhm.
don't, but walk us through when you first learned about it and what you thought, and then versus what you know about it now.
Right. So when I learned about it, it was a transaction I actually took over from an escrow officer who had just resigned our company. and I wasn't too sure, how it was structured. Um, Traditionally, the 1031 exchanges were, established, and those specific instructions assist with the deferred, transfers of property taxes. And after reading the instructions for just deferred sale trust, it's structured very similarly to a 1031 exchange. But what I learned is that you can defer the taxes for a primary residence, where a 1031 exchange is solely for investment properties. So that was the first, that I learned of, primary residence being included in these types of transactions.
And to that point right there,
Mhm.
I mean, that's so big to just to really grasp, because the same thing
Right.
happened for me as well. And growing up in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley area, and all of the highly appreciated homes, friends and family who've been there for, 10, 20, 30 years, bought really low and prices are through the roof. I'm
Mhm.
thinking of a deal actually in Cupertino, and it was for a client who had sold next to the Apple headquarters, and her
Mhm.
house was worth 3.1 million, and her kids are gone, and she had bought it somewhere around 800, or I think around five or $600,000, about 20 or so years before that. And so above and beyond her 121 exclusion, right? If you lived there two of the last 5 years, 250 if you're single, you get that exemption, and 500 if you're married. Well, above that, she was owing somewhere around 400 or $500,000 of liability. So she
Mhm.
used the deferred sales trust to defer all of that, right? And she had done multiple 1031 exchanges, has owned investment properties for years. But just how big of a deal do you think that is for folks who just don't know? I mean, how can you put that in context for the amount of deals that you're doing, especially high end primary homes in the Bay Area?
Yeah, downsizing in the Bay Area, the capital gain taxes can be enormous. With the exclusion, 500,000 every 2 years. So yeah, when I learned that, what I experienced is the sellers selling these high valued homes, were having to really think through how, and losing out on funds that they could allocate for future withdrawals versus just paying the government um, for the taxes on a sale. So yeah, my career was built in Silicon Valley, Cupertino, right next to the Apple headquarters, and so we saw many sellers in this situation. And it's the most savvy sellers that are looking into this deferred sale trust. What I'm learning, and after meeting them and having the discussion up front of um, having their primary residence sold and handled through a deferred sale trust, you know, um, it's coming to me after they've been well educated and versed in how it's handled.
Sure.
And so that's the main thing. Every so often I'll, with the referrals that you and I work on, we'll bring up this type of transaction, and it's almost unbelievable to the seller. They don't really understand it. But after they gain the education, they will most definitely make that decision. We've seen a lot of sellers go that route.
Absolutely. And it's only increasing more and more as more
Right.
transactions close and more people hear and understand that it's really just an installment sale, right? We're using a
Right.
third party unrelated trustee. That's our role here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions.
Right.
And we're actually going to assign the interest of the asset that's being sold to this newly formed trust.
Mhm.
And then that new trust is going to turn around and sell it to the buyer. And since it bought and sold for the same price, it has no gain. And since the
Mhm.
seller is receiving what's called an installment or a promissory note, it's like an installment sale, they're going to
Mhm.
receive slowly payments back from the trust. That being said, Susan, it's still even hard, and you do this all the time. But for the new listener who's listening, right? What's maybe the most important thing to understand to make it simple? Like, how would you describe it? What I just said, the same way. What would you add or subtract to that?
Yeah, so the transaction handled by the title company, we issue a title policy to the buyer, and that's where we come in and work closely with the deferred sale trust attorneys to make sure that the assignment also includes the direct deeding of the property. So that means the actual seller, current owner of the property, is the one that signs the grant deed to the buyer. So that's what we refer to as direct deeding. The assignment is for the purchase agreement, so that the seller can assign their proceeds to the deferred sale trust. So it's almost two parts to the transaction, where Orange Coast Title has become known, and myself, to handle these transactions because of the direct deeding. There are quite a few of our competitors who shy away from this transaction only because they're not really educating themselves on how it's handled, and they're much bigger than, they have these huge corporate companies that will, see it as more of a risk because they just don't do them very often, so they'll just shy away from the transaction altogether. But with the direct deeding is where we're allowed to insure the property transfer so that it's all within the California regulations. So
Very well said.
that's
Very
the
well said. Yeah, and
biggest part,
these transactions are they are technical, right? And we need to
right?
stay within the guardrails, and we have to do certain things in certain orders. And if we mess that up, it's taxable. But by the way, it's not unlike a 1031 exchange in a lot of ways.
No.
We were saying earlier, that we have to do things in certain order for those as well. And so, what would you say the biggest difference, as far as once you've done now, I think over 20 of these at least transactions, right, help close? What would
Mhm.
you say the biggest difference between the deferred sales trust, as far as either paperwork or technicalities,
Mhm.
versus the 1031 exchange?
Mhm.
And the reason I'm asking is, it seems like, because everyone knows the 1031 exchange, and it's just there's 5,000 exchange companies educating people all the time.
Mhm.
Whereas the deferred sales trust is literally like one installment sale
Mhm.
attorney that does it, a group, and then there's a few trustees, that's me, and then there's some others, but obviously it's proprietary to protect it. But once you've actually done the transaction, is there really any more complex than a 1031, Susan?
No, not really. The 593 will confirm that the sale proceeds were deferred. So that's the protection for the seller for tax purposes after close of escrow. Um, and what I've learned is some sellers are able to receive funds at close and defer, X amount of dollars to the deferred sale trust, the DST. So with that, I've also learned that sellers can use their own investment brokers to, create the account that they would like their funds to be held in after close of escrow, and or with that promissory note, be able to draw it in the future. And that all gets handled by the attorneys. So again, as long as I receive the specific instruction from the deferred sale trust attorneys for the assignment and the direct deeding, the allocation of funds are really at the seller's discretion.
Excellent. Very well said. And yeah, and that's where our team here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions will help you design what we like to call an optimal timing transformational exit plan, where you can sell your high-end primary home, investment real estate, or either works for stocks, bonds, it works for stock, highly appreciated stocks, cryptocurrency, as well as artwork and collectibles. You can defer the tax using a deferred sales trust. And then once the funds are in the newly formed bank account, a financial advisor can manage the funds and can now hopefully earn an interest on that. Typically, we shoot for about 8%, 7%, or 6%, depending on the risk tolerance of the client, and net of all recurring fees, and then try to pay back. And so, let's say the recent deal, I just did a $7.9 million sale in Aptos, just south of Santa Cruz. We helped that family defer about $2.5 million of tax. And it used to be their primary home, turned into a rental, and they didn't want to do a 1031 exchange. And so that's exactly what they did. They parked the funds there, and then the funds can be slowly paid out, and they'll pay tax slowly along the way, which is why the IRS has seen it, knows it, and allows it, because it actually is incentivizing people to sell and do transactions and also pay tax slowly along the way versus not selling. So that's IRC 453. If anyone wants to learn more about that, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That being said, Susan, what questions should potential deferred sales trust individuals who are looking at this be asking that aren't? And what would you say? Maybe one or two questions that they should ask, but they that maybe they haven't thought about yet.
So one thing is, the title insurance vesting. What they will need to double check for themselves is how they hold title, and if they're in their own trust, to be able to provide not just myself, but the deferred sale trust attorneys their full trust agreement so that they can have that reviewed prior to making their decision. Also, whether or not they, have it held under an entity name. So knowing how they hold title ahead of time is very important. That way we can obtain the proper documentation up front so that there's no delays. Also, whether or not they own a mortgage on the property, and if they're going to decide to defer all of their funds to the deferred sale trust or request an upfront withdrawal, so that they can determine how much the franchise tax board will withhold at the time of close. So, those are the pertinent questions that come up most often. How they hold title, we always issue a title report, and the rest of it's pretty seamless. So, it goes pretty smooth, but it's the timing as well. I've had some sellers call me. They say they're going to have it handled through a 1031 exchange. All of a sudden they get educated that there's a deferred sale trust, and it's the timing we need, to have the proper instructions in place in order to close. If they get an all cash offer and they want to close in 7 days, they really need to be ready and have all their documentation provided to the escrow officer so that we can be ready to close their transaction.
Yeah, let's walk through that for a second. That's a
later.
really important point here, okay? And so we always say it's never too early to get your deferred sales trust ready and set to go. In fact, we have what's called a conditional or a conditional engagement agreement, where if for some reason the deal doesn't close, or some reason you don't want to use the deferred sales trust, you don't owe the deferred sales trust tax attorneys nor capital gains tax solutions any money. But what we found in the past is if we don't take that pressure off, then what folks would do naturally is they'll just wait to the last minute. And if they wait to the last minute, it can be too late, legally speaking, because the entity hasn't been formed before all contingencies have been removed. Right. And so we need to prepare and pre-prepare for that. And so, especially in the Bay Area, we actually just a recent deal in Palo Alto, Susan, was an $8.3 million a primary home sale. And that particular deal, same thing. It was all cash. I think it was a 14-day close, and sometimes they're 10 days, sometimes they're 7 days, and a lot of them are removing contingencies very quickly. Right. And so if you're waiting to try to set it up between now and, by the time it goes in escrow and the time the trust is formed, it can be too late. And so we want to encourage you to go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. And if you're going to be selling anytime in the next 30, 60, 90, 6 months, and you're going to be selling, let's just form the trust today. Let's get it in place. Let's get everyone prepared. Let's get Susan on board, ready to do the escrow, because that's another thing too. You want to be working with professionals who have actually done these transactions. I always liken it back to a brain surgeon, or in fact, a knee surgery, right? I had 2 ACLs replaced, and some of the questions you want to ask if you're going to have your ACL replaced is, well, how many have you closed, and what's been the outcome of these things, right? And you don't want to go with an agent who has never done a deferred sales trust. Neither do you want to go with an escrow officer who's never handled it. There's too many complexities and too many things to slip through for your transaction. So it's too important. It's so important to work with the professionals who've done that. That's why you want to connect with Susan and me to make sure that it's seamless and nothing falls through the cracks. Susan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, going back to, the real estate agent that's going to list the property. I've now, again, with that education that I've gained, I have had a few agents that have reached out to me after learning through their seller that they want to use the the Deferred Sale Trust, and I've helped educate them. So, keeping the, referral system going, we like to, provide them as much information up front. But yeah, if there's an agent out there that has the experience, of course, it makes it much smoother. All the disclosures include the information related to the deferred sale trust up front, and that way it's all transparent. But other than that, the realtors, after I speak to them, if they've never handled one before, it's okay. And we've all helped them, gain the knowledge as well, prior to. But a lot of them do call me months before they decide to list the property, which is awesome, because that's what we want. We want them to be well educated, well versed. That way, when they're taking an offer, they can prepare the contract to include disclosure related to the deferred sale trust.
Perfect. I couldn't say it better myself. And at being a commercial real estate broker, starting at Marcus and Millichap, we learned about the 1031 exchange on about day 3. Didn't learn about the deferred sales trust for 3 years later, and then it was too late because the crash had happened. But since then, it's been over about 11-year journey of educating and being trained and being coached. And by the way, we have an amazing coaching program for realtors or luxury realtors and or commercial real estate brokers. You can go to experttaxsecrets.com to learn more about that coaching program and be prepared, right? I liken it to not knowing about the 1031 exchange. If you're a commercial broker or a realtor by any means, if you don't know about the 1031 exchange, you're missing out, and your clients are potentially going to be paying huge tax for that. So the same with the deferred sales trust, you should know about it. It can save a failed 1031 exchange, by the way. And of course, it can work for a primary home, what we're talking about here today, as well, of course, as other investment property. So go to experttaxsecrets.com to learn more about how to get educated and prepared for that next transaction. That being said, Susan, are you ready for the lightning round?
Yes, let's do
All
it.
right. So here we go. Knowing what you know now, if you go back to your 25-year-old self, and this is just a general question for life or leadership or wisdom, what's the one golden nugget that you would make sure to tell yourself at that age?
Oh, whoa, that's going way back. So just, to have confidence in myself. I grew up being really sheltered and shy, and, actually being here today with you, Brett, is, something that, gets me out of my comfort level. So I would just pretty much tell myself, you know what, let others guide you, feel comfortable with yourself, and just speak what you know. When we speak what we know, then it's fluid and we don't feel so uncomfortable. So, the more we gain our knowledge, the easier it is to share it with others. And that's what I would tell myself then. Don't be so shy and just get out there and share what you know.
Love it. Question number 2. What's the one book you've gifted or recommended the most in the past year or so?
The past year, so it's been interesting because I, took a bit of a journey, myself, just, learning more about, who I am, and the spirit in me, and letting God guide. And, I've had some life changes, lost my dad 4 years ago, sticking by my mom. And, I just, went into just some self-exploring for myself. And so the biggest one that is shared a lot is the 4 agreements, and it was just helps with just understanding that we're in a bigger universe than we all think we are.
Beautiful. Love that. Number 1 leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
Oh, there's so many. I just to give. I just really feel that when the position I'm at, branch manager, I have 5 escrow officers in my branch. We have a couple of assistants, and just taking the time. I do handle my own desk, but really taking the time. I try to help others in my branch, just to help them strive to do better and to meet their goals. So that makes me feel great after they share with me that they've done it.
Absolutely love it. Give me a mobile or digital resource that you strive or that helps you to be more productive or to delegate.
Oh, I told you when we started, I'm not too tech savvy, but but honestly, Zoom has been great, but again, that's learning to get out of my comfort level with what we're not allowed to share or be in front of the public right now. But that tool's been great just to keep the communication, to feel more one-on-one with our clients and helping with the education again. So just don't be so shy to be behind, the camera, and you know, we're working behind the scenes, but I think Zoom is one that we're helping, people get comfortable with right now
Yeah,
to
for sure.
share.
We're doing on Restream.io, but Zoom is usually the one I use. So
Yeah.
yes, that is big right now. What are you curious about right now?
Am I curious? I'm curious about learning about my whole new surroundings in Roseville.
Yeah, Lifetime Fitness, right? Which is where we found out we
Yeah.
both attend,
Uh-huh.
where it's a fitness center that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And all of what Placer County has to offer. Love that. Last question. After all your success being a senior escrow officer, branch manager, and I mean, I don't know how many thousand deals you've done over the years, helping with the Deferred Sales Trust, learning something new, which maybe not be easy for most escrow officers, right? Because
Right.
I don't know, maybe it is easy, maybe it's not, but it's because you're so regimented with everything that you're doing. I'm curious, how do you stay centered, Susan, in your values? And then how do you stay encouraged to keep charging forward to reach new goals?
Again, it's just, not feeling uncomfortable with the situation and just going for it. So, I started my career, first transactions I closed back then were just refinances. And then I grew into handling resales, and then more and more clients with 1031 exchanges. And it's just not there are escrow officers don't feel comfortable handling certain transactions, and I've had a deal transferred over from another branch, or one of my associates in my own branch saying, oh, I don't feel comfortable handling this because I just don't have the education. And I'll help them, tell them no, stick with it, but some don't. But again, it's just you know, just taking time to learn what the transaction is about. Right now, my goal is to do more commercial transactions, land deals, um, and that way I can gain more knowledge there. So again, this business is ever changing, and now being in the Roseville, Sacramento area, I'm sure there's going to be different transactions that I'm going to learn, about, and you know, it's just
That's great, Susan. I
it's
love it. I
nonstop.
love it. It's a great act. I love that you're always up for new challenge. You want to grow and learn more and get into other more commercial stuff. And I think that's fantastic. I want to thank you for being on the show. For our listeners who want to reach out to you, Susan, would you give them the best place to contact you right now?
Yeah, so I'm always available on the phone. I love taking phone calls. So my office number is in the Bay Area. It's 650-946-2182. Otherwise, send me an email and I'll respond to you with your question. My email address is susanT@octitle.com. And again, we are in our offices working. I do have remote access from home, so I have a home office set up. So I'm a Monday through Friday girl, though I'm here with Brett on a Sunday. But otherwise, I'm here to service and help with transactions whenever needed.
Beautiful. Well, Susan, I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to thank you for sharing your experience with the Deferred Sales Trust and a bit about your story. and how you help people close transactions by being an amazing expert senior escrow officer at Orange Coast Title. And I also want to thank our listeners for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, to sell your high-end primary home or investment property or business or other highly appreciated asset is the best way for you to exit and defer tax. With that, please go to experttaxsecrets.com if you are a business professional and you want to learn more about the Deferred Sales Trust. Or if you are wanting to learn for yourself, for your own transaction, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to get your deferred sales trust started today. And we appreciate everyone out there. Please rate, review, subscribe to our YouTube channel and on iTunes for our show.